Hello and a very warm welcome to the late breaking F1 podcast presented by Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking, today reviewing the Italian Grand Prix. An Italian Grand Prix won by Charles Leclerc for Ferrari. Sam, let's get out of the way. You predicted it.
Oh, is there anything better than a Ferrari win at Monza? And after oh God, it was spicy. I'm so excited. Yes, I predicted it. And Charles Leclerc has been godly. He sent a godsend message to me, and I'm now getting another bold prediction point. So, God, what a good day. What a good day it is for me and for Charles Leclerc. Equal measures, I think. I think we've achieved equal amounts today.
Sure. He won with the two McLarens joining him on the podium. Oscar Piastri in second, Lando Norris in third. Carlos Sainz finished in fourth, Hamilton fifth for Mercedes, Verstappen sixth, Russell seventh, Perez eighth, Albon ninth, and Magnussen gets the last point in 10th. We've got a lot to run through on today's episode. Moment of the race is coming up later on. Quite a few penalties handed out today. We'll give our verdict on whether they were just or not. A little bit on the midfield fight. Again, Albon and Magnussen getting the points today in that battle. Mercedes and Red Bull, how they fared, but it's only natural to start out front with Charles Leclerc taking that race win. Ultimately, the one stop is what helped him to victory. Piastri and Norris behind him going for two-stop races. They had Piastri and Norris both at one point had the lead in this race, but it's Charles Leclerc who walks away with the 25 points and his second race win on the season. Strategy-wise, Sam, have Ferrari just borrowed someone else's team? Because they seem to be good at it now.
Well, you say that, but yet it felt like they got it incredibly wrong to begin with. Once again, it felt like an absolute Ferrari blunder, right? It's almost like they walked through the door and went, oh, no, this is the wrong room. Turn around, go back into the other room. That's the strategy room. Yeah, I mean, to kickstart your point, we now have 4 multiple race winners throughout this season with another 3 drivers who have 1 race win. Constructors' Championship has come down to about 40 points between 3 teams. It is getting spicy with 8 races to go. And what a season we're now having. What a spicy season we're now having. And Ferrari, I think, somehow really blundered their way into an absolutely excellent strategy call. You saw the fact that they got undercut, right? So Piastri and Norris coming first. Leclerc is the last of coming of those 3. He ends up having a bit of a vent over the radio trying to say, why have we come in straight after if we're just going to get undercut? Why have we not stayed out for longer and tried to maximize the tyres? Having a right old go at Ferrari, at his strategy team, only for that almost to pay off because the extra couple of laps meant that he had slightly younger tyres and then they just didn't come back in again. You heard Oscar Piastri in the cool-down room saying, we considered the one stop. We weren't really sure if the tyres can make it. And when I looked at my tyres, they just didn't look good. They didn't look good. So, fair play. Fair play to Leclerc for dragging it all the way out. I think it was a bold and risky strategy. I think a puncture maybe could have appeared at any moment, but they played it off. And Sainz, maybe not as fortunate, maybe not as skilled at getting the car as far as he needed to, but he also played a very pivotal role at just being a roadblock for a lap or so that meant that the time had to come down a little later than Piastri wanted. It ended up being a genius call from Ferrari. One, I don't know if they strictly meant for it to happen.
So I think I agreed completely with Charles Leclerc on the strategy that meant he came in just 1 lap after Lando Norris. I thought that was a dreadful call because obviously Lando Norris gets the undercut on him, again, only by 1 lap. Charles Leclerc comes into the pits, and that was a good pit stop by Ferrari. I think it was 2.5 seconds. So the fact that Charles Leclerc and his team, they got a 2.5 second pit stop, and he was still a couple of seconds behind Lando Norris as he came out the pits. Leclerc had every right to be angry about that because that was just nonsensical. If they did a 1.8 second pit stop, he still wasn't going to be ahead of Norris. There was no way he was ever going to get out ahead of him. And in reality, he had, I think, 5 lap older tyres at the end versus Carlos Sainz. I've got no idea why they didn't just do the same thing with Leclerc that they did with Sainz. Give him, it worked out okay, obviously, and I think the 1 stop was the right way to go. But they should have just kept him out on those mediums a couple laps longer, and then he would have had more to fight with at the end. Again, he didn't need it, but if he did, that's absolutely where I would have gone to if Piastri had got this on the last lap.
I think it's interesting you bring that up, actually, because I thought about that before we started recording. And I actually think Leclerc coming in 1 lap later, again, agree with you and Leclerc, like it was a terrible, terrible call. Ended up losing a position, falling further behind, had to regain DRS. Awful position to be in. But because the McLarens weren't on new tyres for so much longer, you saw this with Hamilton versus Verstappen. You saw it with Sainz versus the McLarens. the new tyre benefit allowed the gap to be built up so much that I don't think it could have been turned over. So weirdly, by Leclerc being stuck in the McLaren's DRS the entire time, being towed along until they had their second pit stop, I actually think it meant he got the best of both worlds. He got to run with the McLaren to be pulled along, but wasn't undercut to the point where he lost 10, 15 seconds. Look at the gap between Leclerc and Sainz at the end of the Grand Prix. I think he may have been passed, weirdly, if he stopped later the first time around.
Maybe. I mean, he wasn't in the DRS of like the McLaren on that. He was for a lap or two, but for the most part, he was a couple of seconds back. And maybe there's something in the distant tow, and maybe that was the reason they did it. I just think that obviously Sainz was in a pretty similar position, but just went a few laps longer. I feel like they were always going to get undercut, so they might as well have gone a couple laps longer. It didn't end up mattering, obviously, and the one stop was absolutely the right way to go. And it was said at the end of the race that obviously Ferrari have pulled off this one stop strategy versus McLaren, but more cars did one stops than two stops. It was a far more viable strategy than I think McLaren and a few others made it out to be. You know, we saw, and we'll get on to Red Bull later on, but Red Bull very early on committed this is going to be a two-stop. McLaren seemed to think it was off the table. But we saw with Albon being ahead of Alonso as an example, this one-stop strategy, and it was what was recommended before the race by Pirelli. Like, it was definitely a viable strategy, and for whatever reason, McLaren didn't think it was achievable. Ferrari definitely thought it was, because, I mean, give Piastri another 2 laps, maybe he gets it. I don't know. He might need 3 or 4 to get that done if Leclerc's in all-out defence mode.
This isn't a racetrack like what we saw at Zandvoort or something like Spa or Hungary, where having fresh tyres is so beneficial. You remember how few corners we have here at Monza and how much having fresh rubber really benefits you. Watch how the gap didn't come down between Piastri and Leclerc once he finally got past Sainz. It stayed around that 11 to 10 second mark for 3 or 4 laps before he really started to see that benefit. Monza is not a place where undercutting isn't essential if you're stuck on your own. What you need is the benefit of slipstream and tow and clean air around you. If you've got someone who can match your pace, who can pull you along, old tyres or not, that's how you gain that advantage around somewhere like Monza. It is not the same as a Silverstone, where fresh tyres, you put them on, you knock in 2 or 3 faster laps in the car that's still out there, and you will be 6 or 7 seconds clear. I don't think it has the same advantage here. So the one stop, like you said, really surprising that more teams up front didn't consider it. I only think Lewis Hamilton did the 2-stop because he had such a gap behind him with the whole Perez and Russell were back. Magnussen was the car behind him at one point. He almost just had free air to drop into, and he wasn't going to catch up to the cars in front.
Yeah, I was surprised, I will say. But yeah, fair play to Ferrari. They pulled that off, and Charles Leclerc pulled this off as well, because again, I mean, Carlos Sainz he did qualify 1 position behind Charles Leclerc. He was on the same strategy, but had slightly fresher tyres. Sainz couldn't keep the 2 McLarens behind him. Leclerc did. So this is, give respect to Ferrari for what they were able to achieve, but give respect to the individual as well, because Charles Leclerc, again, if it was such an amazing strategy that was undeniable, it would have been a Ferrari 1-2, and it wasn't.
Yeah, this wasn't the George Russell strategy of Belgium, where he pulled something completely out of the blue and did something that no one else did. I know how that ended up, but still, that's relevant. This was, as you mentioned, the recommended strategy, and Ferrari just went, we should just do exactly what Pirelli tell us to do, and we will win. And then it happened, and Leclerc guided it home. I did enjoy him being quite sassy over the radio, though, telling people can you just shut up? I'm quite under pressure right now. Please just let me get on with it.
Well, it would have been very interesting, and we won't get on to Mercedes and Red Bull until a little bit later on in the episode, but it would have been interesting if they didn't have such a free hit, because Charles Leclerc knew that if worse comes to worse, McLaren get them and they end up 3rd and 4th. So they might as well have gone for it. There wasn't really anything to lose and only something to gain. But that is because Red Bull and Mercedes were, at least in this race, quite distant from Ferrari and McLaren. If that wasn't the case, I don't know if Ferrari have the guts to make this call, and instead maybe they mirror what McLaren do. But that's hypothetical. We'll never know.
Yeah, and you know what? It turned what was an all-right race with some interesting parts to a real slow burner that kicked off at the end that made it incredibly dramatic. And I'm grateful for it. As a spectator, I'm grateful to how fun that race became. It was another brilliant Grand Prix for this season.
Right, let's move on to the McLaren side of things, because they did start first and second in this Grand Prix, with Norris first, Piastri second. Piastri has stayed in exactly the same position, but Lando Norris has gone down 2 positions to finish in third. He did claim the fastest lap, so he gets 16 points on the day rather than 15. Let's take it somewhat chronologically. We saw Norris and Piastri pretty much side by side going into turn 1. At least initially, Lando Norris is able to just about keep that lead. But of course, Piastri surprises him with an overtake a little bit later on in the lap. And Piastri goes off into the distance, with Charles Leclerc, with Norris being slowed down, also able to get a position. How impressed were you, first of all, by what Piastri was able to do?
I mean, you know how boxers sometimes get nicknames when they get announced? I think we might have to go for Oscar the Pickpocket Piastri, because the way he absolutely swept around the outside of that move was bold, to say the least. To do that on your teammate on lap 1. The fact that obviously Lando held on to the lead, and we were all a little bit unsure whether he could do that. Goes into turn 1, goes through the Curva Grande. There he is. Oscar gets the better exit. And all of a sudden you think, hang on a minute, there's a move on here. It is bold to make that stick on your teammate. And fair play to Piastri. I was so impressed that he got that move done. So impressed. And actually, I think he pretty much had the measure of Norris for the entire race. There were moments, of course, when Norris were faster and he ended up picking up the fastest lap. But at every turn, Piastri had him covered. At one point, he ends up getting 4 or 5 seconds clear, covers off the undercut. You hear this Papaya rules being bounding around multiple times. Oh, my God. Have you when you hear a phrase so many times, it doesn't sound like it's a real thing anymore. The words Papaya rules is now like weirdly embedded into my mind.
I really think it's cringy. Like, I don't know why.
It is cringe.
Papaya rules, like, yeah. Come on, grow up.
It's like they've had to sit down with 2 children going, now, last time when you thought we're going to need a code word, what do you like? Papaya rules.
It's bad.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Anyway. Piastri, I think, had the measure of Norris for a lot of the Grand Prix. Norris, I think, got himself frustrated, became a little flustered. Every time he pitted, he was never in an ideal situation. He gets out in front of Leclerc, of course, after the first pit stop, but then can't ever make inroads properly on Piastri. Never gets back into DRS efficiently. And Leclerc was fantastic at getting through on that mistake from Norris as well, when Norris ends up slow off the exit. And I thought, well done to Leclerc, because that might have been race changing. That might have been the moment that allowed Leclerc to do what he was able to do, where he wasn't cooped up behind both McLarens, but in fact was going off with the, at the time, faster of the 2 McLarens, sitting in his slipstream, only about a second behind on average for the majority of that first stint. Genuinely very impressed by those 2. Is it another bottle from Lando Norris? First down to third. Doesn't look very, very good when you're beaten by your teammate on pure racing alone. Not good from Lando. Once again, throws a strop at the end of the Grand Prix, and it's not gone his way.
Yeah, I was so impressed by Oscar Piastri and what he did on that first lap. And the way I read the McLaren pace was, whichever of the 2 drivers led out of the first lap was going to have the pace to hold off the other one. Like, I don't think either of them had the outright pace to get by the other one if it didn't come on that first lap. So I think what Piastri, correctly identified that was going to be probably his one and only opportunity to get by Lando Norris, and he took it. That overtake was sublime. Inch perfect. Like, he
razor close.
Could not have done that any better. And Lando Norris, as he admitted afterwards, was surprised by it. I don't think he saw that coming. Piastri, if he gets that even a little bit wrong, that is not only a disaster for himself, that's probably a disaster for both teams. Given what's at stake with the Constructors' Championship, that could have gone so wrong. So the fact that he was bold enough to try and pull off that move, and he made it work, I thought that was sensational. For Lando Norris, I don't want to say I can sympathize, but also, like, him losing 2 positions, it's like it's 1 error. It's not 2 errors. Like, the first error led to Leclerc getting by. But what was worse is that later on he had an incident at the same corner by himself, and he lost a number of seconds there where he was looking like he could maybe apply some pressure, and then all of a sudden Leclerc's right on his rear wing within DRS because of an error he made. So this was a missed opportunity for Lando Norris. If you said before the race, okay, you're starting on pole, Verstappen is starting in 7th, you're going to claim, what was it in the end? You are going to claim 8 more points than him. He'd go,
is that it? Did I win and Verstappen got up to 2nd place? Is that how it works, is it?
That was what you would assume, yeah. And in fact, Verstappen made up 1 position. So
yeah,
it wasn't exactly a...
He only made it up because Russell had the contact.
Yeah, so I think Norris will be disappointed that he couldn't make more inroads into that championship advantage of Verstappen today.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to say, do you think this is a missed hit for Lando Norris here?
Yeah,
The fact that, the championship, well, we said it in the preview, right? We said how, you get one race in the last 8 or 9 and it swings properly. And this was, I think if Lando Norris sees Lando on Friday, you're going to start pole, Max will start 7th. Secretly, championship surely on now. You could turn this around. And if he's gone, I didn't even come second in that Grand Prix, and Max also went forwards, it's not good enough. It's not the work of a champion to see that you can't convert these opportunities time and time again when the pressure is piled on. It's one thing, as you mentioned, that he was overtaken by Piastri, and what was a sensational move. And Leclerc, opportunistic. I can't blame Norris for Leclerc being opportunistic. It was a well thought out little extra move. Fine. But like you said, the mistake at the same corner to drop 2 seconds in one turn and completely evaporate any chance of overtaking your teammate, and he's gaining another 3 points. That is where a champion would step up, and that is where someone who is not ready to step up doesn't. And I think that's the difference at the moment with where Lando Norris is.
2 yes or no questions, both relating to team orders. Should McLaren have used any team orders on that first lap? And should McLaren have used any team orders on the last lap?
For entertainment purposes, I'd like to say no to both. But if they want championships, yeah. Yeah, if we're going to be brutal about it, yes. Oscar, you stay behind Lando and you defend him. Oscar, you give up the position to Lando and you allow it. But I disagree with them. I don't want it to happen. Oscar drove the better race. I'm happy that Oscar got the points.
I think the issue with team orders, because of course this is the second real opportunity that McLaren have had to use them after Hungary as well. Norris is 62 behind Verstappen. Piastri is currently closer to Norris than Norris is to Verstappen. Like that is still the case. Now, Piastri is 44 behind Norris, which isn't a massive margin. Like if the margin between these two drivers was bigger, like it kind of was in the Hamilton-Bottas days, and we've seen it in Schumacher and Barrichello. It's just been a far wider gap between the two teammates when this is deployed. It's still not quite there yet.
I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but the gap doesn't matter between those two. It would have to be so minuscule. It's the gap to Verstappen that matters. And as much as I think Piastri is doing brilliantly and Lando's letting himself down, the gap between Piastri and Verstappen is too big to be made up at this point, I think.
Yeah, that is over 100 points at this stage, and I don't think... Well, you never know based on how Red Bull were today, but I think that's unlikely. But yeah, it's interesting because based on that first lap move from Piastri, you'd shown a meme that I probably won't say verbatim, but I don't think Piastri cares a lot about Norris's championship.
Piastri's here to kick down some doors and make a name for himself. And someone in our live stream chat said, if McLaren have got what it takes to win a driver's title, I think Piastri does it before Norris at this point, which is a big claim. I'm not sure I agree with it, but it shows he's here to play and he's not here to be a number 2 driver.
That is for sure. We're going to take our first break on this episode. On the other side, we're going to get into what happened for for Mercedes and Red Bull. Okay, so we've covered off the first 4 positions in this race that were occupied by McLaren and Ferrari. We now go into 5th down to 8th, which was occupied by Mercedes and Red Bull. So Lewis Hamilton eventually finishing in 5th. Verstappen making up 1 position in the race to finish in 6th. George Russell, after a difficult first lap, comes home 7th, with Sergio Perez in 8th. Let's have a look at Red Bull first of all, because they didn't qualify very well, obviously, down in 7th and 8th. It didn't get much better for them out in the race.
No, Max Verstappen only gains because George Russell has that issue where I think it was never clear to me where the contact was. Was it on turn 1? Did he clip the back of Piastri's front wing? And that's what...
I guess it was. Like I didn't think it was on board. But equally, like that matches up exactly to where the damage was. So
he didn't come back on dangerously. He didn't touch anyone when he came back on the track. So unless I think Piastri, they're quite lucky not to pick up a puncture if that really was how it occurred. Anyway, so Max Verstappen gains 1 place due to George Russell essentially taking the front wing damage, having to do the elongated pit stop. Ends up being about 10, 11 seconds for a front wing change, which is pretty standard. And I felt a bit sorry for George Russell because he looked really racy off the start, looked like it was going to be quite punchy. And then Piastri didn't do anything wrong. Piastri, again, also quite advantageous in trying to make a move stick. It was two cars was being very, very close together at the start, and George Russell ends up being slightly punished for it, unfortunately. What was worrying on the other side for Red Bull is that Max Verstappen at one point looked relatively close to Lewis Hamilton, usually around where they started to do their pit stops. And then the gap just widened and widened and widened. I think they got the strategy call wrong. I think that the double hard tyre stint was a bad call. They should have just kept running long on those hard tyres and maybe hope for a safety car to come in for some mediums. The pace wasn't there in a straight line. They couldn't really get moves done. We saw how bad Perez was going up against George Russell. At no point could he cleanly get past George Russell. I actually took to whinging about him a couple of times over the radio, being like, he's let me past. Why is he now racing me again? I just thought, that's what racing drivers do. Sergio, you race each other when you're near each other on the racetrack. This is worrying times for Red Bull. There is every chance here that they might have been the fourth fastest car around this racetrack. The fact that Perez ends up finishing behind Russell even after all the troubles really is unnerving for them. If Ferrari carry on with this upward trend and McLaren keep dominating the front three positions of some variation, Red Bull could find themselves third in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, very easily. They were the fourth fastest team out there. That's the analysis. Like, there's not too much more to it. They were the fourth fastest team. And when you're in that position, strategy really matters to see if you can get something done. I think I mentioned this maybe in yesterday's episode, that Red Bull starting 7th and 8th with no real opportunity to be overtaken by anyone 9th down. They had the opportunity to be creative, and they were to an extent, because they
started on the hards, right?
They started on the hard tyres. No one else did, which I thought was the right call. You do something different to the 6 cars in front of you. And then I just don't quite understand what they were playing, like with the double hard stint, then onto the mediums late on. Obviously, the medium tyre was degrading quite quickly, but
I don't think it was a good race tyre either. I do not think it was particularly good.
No. But yeah, I mean, they only had a couple of laps advantage on the likes of Carlos Sainz, who started on the mediums when they came in for their first stop to go on to the hards. I'm not quite sure what they were going for.
I think they got suckered in. I think they quickly realised that it's going to be a 2-stop race, and they were running out of laps, and they went, we've still got to do another hard stint here and then get onto the mediums. I think they realised they hadn't broken up the race in the correct proportions for themselves, and I don't think the one stop ever occurred to them. I genuinely don't think it ever crossed their minds.
Yeah, and maybe this was just a case of, look, and if this is the case, this is quite dismal. We can't beat the Ferraris, we can't beat the McLarens, and we probably can't beat Lewis Hamilton. We need to deploy a strategy that can get us ahead of Russell. And maybe that's what they were going for, because Verstappen ultimately did finish ahead of Russell, not by a lot, but he did. Like, if that's who they thought they were racing, which was accurate, the guy who had to make a front wing change and make a way earlier pit stop than he wanted to, that's pretty dismal. Like, that, if that's who you're racing. This is a team that has won plenty of races this year, and they are thinking about how can we beat a guy that has had to come in for a front wing change who might get back to 6th or 7th. Yikes.
I think what worried me the most was Max Verstappen's attitude over the radio to the rest of the team. You know, where he comes over and goes, can those at the back wake up, please? You know, I think he was panicking that Russell was getting closer and closer. Russell, who was driving a pretty good recovery race after what happened. And I think it's starting to dawn on Max Verstappen that every single point here is counting. We know that Max Verstappen likes to go race to race. He just pick up his wings, pick up his podiums. He isn't someone he's not the Prost of this world who will sit there and go, I will win this championship by doing the absolute bare minimum. I don't care about the records. I want the championship at the end. Max Verstappen isn't like that. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. He loves to race the race, and he loves to get as good as he can in every single independent race. And at the end, he happens to win a title. Good for him. I think today it dawned on him that isn't going to work right now. And if he does want to stay in front of Lando Norris, regardless of what's happening, they need every point. So George Russell getting closer was a real worry. It's a real wake-up call for him, and I think a lot of Red Bull.
And if they genuinely couldn't have pulled off a one-stop strategy in that their tyre wear was too high, again, that's a worry, because it's similar to what we saw at Zandvoort, is that they don't seem to be as kind on their tyres now as some of the other teams are. If Ferrari can pull off that one-stop strategy, if other teams like, Williams can pull off that one-stop strategy, then Red Bull should realistically think they can as well. But either they made a strategic blunder, or their tyres could not cope with it. Either way, it's not good news.
No. And with Singapore coming up, which is a tyre buffet, I think they need to be quite careful with how they progress. I mean, hopefully it's more like Zandvoort for them. Maybe they're closer to the podium and they're not focusing a lot on their weaknesses, which seem to be exposed here at Monza, but it's still going to be a real challenge for them.
They've scored 12 points today. 12. That's it. It's really not good. And Ferrari have not even had a double podium here, and yet they have scored 25 more points than Red Bull have. If they do that twice over the next 2 races, they are beating Red Bull. Like it's really not that much of a margin. We kept joking about this, especially over the summer break. Oh, Ferrari, what they doing? These upgrades don't seem to work. How are they still here? How are they this close to the front still? It's actually quite remarkable how Charles Leclerc is putting an absolute shift in this season. Sainz is doing a good job, but Leclerc is smashing it. The car being that close, when I don't think once, other than maybe Monaco, they have outright had the best car. Even at Monza, I don't know if they had the outright best car. Just a great strategy call. It's impressive where they are. Yeah, it is, and I hate to be that guy again, but Ferrari's second driver is fairly close to their first driver. McLaren's second driver is fairly close to their first driver. It's costing Red Bull. Right now, it is costing them a lot. I know they've still got the lead, but it is
What's the points gap? What's the points gap between Perez and Verstappen now? Do we know it?
160.
Crikey, is it that big?
Yes.
So even if it was 100 points less, also no one clip crikey, is it that big, please, and use that externally. So even if it was 80 points less than that, right, they'd be another 3 races in front of their competitors.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Sainz and Leclerc separated by 33 points. You've got Piastri and Norris separated by 44, and then you have Verstappen and Perez separated by 160. Like it's not comparable. So it's we'll see how it goes over the next few races. But if this form of Red Bull continues, I just don't see how they're going to live with those other 2 teams, particularly McLaren, but probably Ferrari as well.
Very, very interesting. Let us know your thoughts, of course. You get involved in all the conversations. Discord's in the description. Or you can comment now on likes of Spotify as well. Leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts.
I'm going to be slightly more critical of Russell than you were.
Go on.
I thought he fumbled the first corner a bit. And I know he had... Obviously, Piastri's getting in the slipstream of Lando Norris on what will become the inside of the corner, which essentially opens up the outside for George Russell. And I know that he is at that point going... Oh my God, round the outside for the lead.
And it's going
I could do it. Mind. The realistic side of you has to go, Piastri's going to go for that gap. And I feel like Russell should have just anticipated it. And he had a reasonable car. Like, I'm not sure if what he'd have been able to do versus the Ferraris in the race, obviously. But certainly P5 was available for him here. I think he just needs to brake half a second earlier and account for what Piastri's going to do there.
Unfortunately for George Russell, it is once again another occasion where he has out-qualified Lewis Hamilton, but he has not outscored Lewis Hamilton. And this is now becoming quite a running trend between the 2 Mercedes drivers. There are now, 40-odd points between those 2?
Yeah, 36, yeah.
There you go. So at the start of this season, Russell looked to have Hamilton in his back pocket, and it is eking out, really starting. And it's these little mistakes. I think the change in downforce when a car sweeps in front of you like that is surprisingly noticeable. I do think Russell would have been taken a little bit by surprise at that change in braking power that maybe he would have expected. But nonetheless, he is still the attacking driver. He is still trying to make a move into what is probably the toughest braking zone in Formula One, turn 1, lap 1 of Monza. And you've got to be careful. You've got another 53 laps to go after this. And we've said it so many times, you can't win a race in lap 1, but you could definitely lose it. He did lose it, and he hasn't got anyone else to blame but himself.
Yeah, and the fact that he was still able to beat Sergio Perez and almost beat Max Verstappen as well, I think proves the fact that Mercedes definitely had a quicker car than Red Bull.
In the bag. 5th and 6th are in the bag.
Exactly. So I think he had a fairly good recovery from that point onwards, but obviously not quite enough to get up to at least 6th place. What did you make of the Russell-Perez battle, by the way?
Very curious, wasn't it? It was really elbows out, and they were full on going for it here. I think I think it wouldn't have happened had what we just spoke about occurred. I think Russell would have been too far up the road from the likes of Perez, who really exist. So I think it only occurred because of the mistake that Russell made. It was on the line for how naughty things got. There was a few moments where Perez was defending from Russell into turn one, definitely didn't leave a car's width, definitely just shut that door, and Russell had to run straight over. No investigation, no penalty. So that seems to be quite hit and miss when we challenge that these days. Russell then re-attacking, obviously, when the position back seemed totally fair. I don't know. It was feisty. I enjoyed it, but I think Russell was essentially trying to get past traffic that was definitely slower than his car.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed by the defense of Perez. I thought it was over the line on a couple of occasions. So and this is a generic criticism rather than one directed solely at Perez. It's Perez's example here, but it's a lot of drivers do this. I hate so much when you have a turn one incident where Perez obviously hasn't left any room whatsoever. Russell is forced to go off, and it wasn't the only one we saw. And then over team radio, it's like, well, why is he racing me? Like he went off track. You forced him there. My idea of racing is you leave a car's width. And if you don't leave that car's width, I don't care what the other driver does. Like if they get passed by going off track, tough. You should have left the space.
You brought it on yourself, right at that point.
I don't care. Like you leave the space, and if you don't, you suffer the consequences. That's my attitude to it. But the one later on was more egregious. The one where he moves in the braking zone.
Right. I'm glad we're bringing that up because that caused me to audibly gasp. A track like Monza, you don't be doing that.
It's nice to see that the black and white flag no longer exists again. That's just gone.
I'm wearing it.
Yes, that's the problem. You've got it, and they've only got one.
Sorry, guys. I've decided to dog it upon my chest.
They're looking in the equipment cupboard to see if they've got another one, and they don't. Yeah, so I thought that they were definitely worth looking at. I was surprised that they didn't even look at the second one for sure. The first one is more my view of what I think racing should be, and I appreciate that's not how the FIA see it. So I'm not surprised that the first one wasn't looked into, but the second one, that looked dodgy to me. So
it's like they didn't want to police it at all, though, because it wasn't just the Perez-Russell battle that had a few moments where cars were being rung off the track. It's like they just went for this race. You have at it. It's Monza. It's going to happen. And I very much disagree. It was the second one that was what really made me go, you're over the line. You're really over the line.
Okay, let's take our second break on this race review episode. On the other side, we're chatting through the midfield battles. Okay, everyone, welcome back. We've got through the first 8 positions in the Grand Prix, which means there were still a few other points up for grabs. Alex Albon eventually getting P9, which is where he qualified for 2 more points. Apparently, that's the only place he can finish if he scores points, is 9th. Like, he can't do anything else.
To be fair, he's won Formula 1.5.
He has won Formula 1.5.
He's never getting further unless there's a DNF right now.
And he's only won Formula 1.5 because Kevin Magnussen got a 10-second time penalty, which has demoted him to 10th place. More about the consequences of that very shortly. Fernando Alonso, it was 1/10 of a second that separated Magnussen and Alonso at the flag.
Close?
Yeah. It was coming down to the wire because it was like 9.8, 9.9, 10 seconds, like on the last couple of laps. And eventually Magnussen just about creates enough of a gap to finish 10th ahead of Alonso in 11th. What did you make of that battle? Because that was fairly close. Albon pulling off the 1 stop, Alonso's 2 stop, not quite working out for him.
Yeah, that was almost the perfect situation for strategy, right? For a viewer's point of view. We say this all the time. We ideally like a 1 stop, a 2 stop, and a 3 stop to be so viable that come the last 5 laps of a race, they all converge at the same point of the track and we get a big old scrap to see which one ends up being the better strategy. I think the Williams looked good. Colapinto moving up to 12th place and shows that, it had good pace there. And I think Albon was very consistent despite taking a few adventurous moments off the side of the racetrack. Yes. Again, not sure if that's his fault, but he did definitely go for a few adventurous moments. K-Mag, I'm very frustrated by. The Haas drivers were chaotic throughout this Grand Prix, but I think overall K-Mag had a very positive Grand Prix. His pace was really solid. He made a lot of strong overtakes, and it looked like this should be his points. You got any immediate thoughts, Ben? I can see you pulling a face.
Yeah, it was very close, and Alex Albon, I think, has done a good job in that he had solid pace all day. And you're right, Colapinto had fairly similar. Albon was definitely quicker, but there wasn't a huge amount in it. So I think Colapinto can be happy with his progress up to 12th place. Magnussen, with that 10-second penalty, he's lost out, obviously, on a point because of that, and it was very clumsy, and we'll get on to some of the other penalties in a moment. Haas, I think, will go away from this race frustrated because I know that the top 8 positions were locked out. I think Haas should have been 9th, 10th here.
I was going to say, for me, they should have been the 5th fastest. They were the 5th fastest team on track. And they had every opportunity to deliver upon being the 5th fastest car. Tsunoda out through their doing. You know, Ricardo mucks up his pit strategy. Well, the poor bloody engineer puts his hand on the wing. And poor lad.
He knows it straight away as well.
Oh, you see his head go. You think, I've been there. Not literally there, but, you know, that is like pure, I've mucked up. Immediately, I'm the one that's mucked up. Bless him. Williams are driving essentially with one hand behind their back because Colapinto's having his first Grand Prix. We don't expect anything of him. Alonso in the Aston Martin is out driving that car and can't do any more. They could have beat Albon on pace and did for the most part. So
and did fairly comfortably. Like, it wasn't that close.
I was actually multiple times. I continually looked at the time board and wait, Kevin Magnussen's still comfortably inside the top 10 here. Why is he not? It dawns on me that the Haas outright pace is comfortably better than the rest of the midfield today.
Yeah, they were, and they'll be annoyed that they didn't get more than a point. I think because Magnussen had a tough weekend up until the race in that he had an incident in one of the free practice sessions where he essentially lost his upgrade/update for the weekend. With the repairs that they did, they had to essentially that was no more. So he was, in theory, performance-wise, at a disadvantage going into this race. And obviously, Hülkenberg, we'll get on to his start and what happened there. But this was a slight missed opportunity. Again, it's not one that massively opened up to the point where, let's say we had 3 retirements ahead of Alex Albon, then suddenly we've got 8 points to play for and 6 points to play for. That wasn't the case here. So that it was going to be a maximum of 3 points for a midfield team. But even so, I think they'll be a little bit disappointed because the fact that Magnussen could build a 10-second gap on Alonso shows what pace advantage they had on most of the midfield. Well, Magnussen's probably not going to race next time out, is he?
What a muppet. What a muppet. It's happened. I mean, we knew it must have happened eventually. He's been sitting on this, was it 2 points needed for a race ban? And he built them up so quickly that he had to do the entire season of 2024 and then 2 races of 2025, which currently he isn't going to feature in, before to clear those points. Race ban it is. First time we've seen a race ban through this build-up of points for a little while now. I mean, I almost maybe good to get it out of the way, I guess. Good to move it on, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't. This is going to sound a bit radical because I'm going to assume that they'll put Behrman in the car for this race.
You wouldn't want to lose an opportunity to put your new driver in for a full Grand Prix weekend.
I know Ocon is probably going to be creeping out the garage like no one's going to spot. Esteban, get back!
Doing's there already in the car.
Yeah. I would assume it's going to be Behrman.
Yeah.
If he does well. Do they
rest of the season?
Do they try and make that happen?
I kind of would. I think why not? Nothing. What are you losing? I don't think Haas can really be usurped from where they are in the championship now at the moment. They're pretty happy behind RB. Are they behind or are they in front of RB?
They're behind RB. That's still a battle, and I think they can get that. So that might be a reason they keep Magnussen for the rest of this season. And obviously the fact that he has a contract, I think this will be up to Magnussen.
Yes.
But I don't know. If Behrman does a good job in the next race, I don't know if they at least consider that as an option.
6 points between them. I'll just have a look. 6 points between the two. Okay, yes, it definitely is in contention. And if, with a few of the faster tracks coming up, if Haas can deploy similar pace, sure, they could pick up 6 points in the next 8 Grand Prix. It is possible. I don't know. Magnussen is so hit and miss. He's so up one race. Like today.
He raced very well.
He raced brilliantly. Yeah. It's so frustrating that he mucked it up with this penalty.
One incident. Like, outside of that, he was great.
I can't compliment him because he's absolutely mucked it up. But this is what's frustrating about Kevin Magnussen. He's so on his moment brilliant, and he has been on his moment brilliant. The issue is those moments come around about twice a season. If Behrman could be 90% of that brilliant Kevin Magnussen for the next 8 races and be consistent at it, they're going to have a better chance. They're going to have a better chance. And it's also, we had the off day where Hülkenberg was not on his A game and was really not up to scratch today as well. So, yeah, there's a part of me that if he smashes it, keep him. I'm all up for it.
Yeah. In a weird way, I'd kind of like this to be Magnussen's last race because it just perfectly typifies his career. Like, he's clear pace, and then just one thing has completely, well, not completely undone it, but slightly undone it. Obviously,
Box office.
That's just me liking how that would fit rather than me wanting him out of a seat, obviously. But let's, before we look at some of those penalties, let's have a look at driver of the day, shall we?
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
Who you got?
Nice and simple. Charles Leclerc. I don't think the car was the fastest car this race weekend. I do think McLaren still had the fastest race car out there. Opportunistic move, of course, to get past Norris. Did brilliantly to stick with Piastri for as long as he did. Rightly voiced that the strategy was maybe the wrong call at the time, and then made those tyres sing. Good lord. If we talk about tyre whisperers, boy, he'd be whispering. That was sensational. So many times throughout this season, I've wanted to give Charles Leclerc driver of the day and really give him the praise he deserves because it is a great season. Finally, he stands out and gets the result for it. So, Charles Leclerc.
Charles Leclerc did not have the best drive of the race. Charles Leclerc just had the best drive of the season.
Really? That good?
No, I cannot think of one performance this season from any driver that was better than what Leclerc did out there today. Because, again, Carlos Sainz was not only on the same strategy, he was arguably on a better strategy. I know they both went from mediums to hards, but Sainz had 5-lap fresher tyres towards the end of that Grand Prix to defend with. And yet, the gap between those two drivers was something like 15 seconds at the flag. Leclerc, and I don't think Sainz did an awful job, by the way, but I think Leclerc did such a phenomenal job to keep those hard tyres alive late in that Grand Prix. We heard McLaren say it wasn't doable. We heard Red Bull say that they were seeing graining from lap 15 onwards. And here's Charles Leclerc, who was put in a strategically difficult position by being undercut by Lando Norris, and he has just managed those tyres absolutely perfectly. Again, this was an easy driver of the day submission, but this was, for me, the best performance of the season so far.
You know it's deserved when, I imagine Harry would probably say the same thing, when we all tend to agree. You know when someone's really shone when we all go down the same route.
Well, actually, Harry has given his driver of the day. He has gone for Daniel Ricciardo.
Oh, shock. He loves Daniel Ricciardo.
He will pick Daniel Ricciardo in anything. Doesn't matter what category it is.
Genuinely, I don't know what the question is, but the answer is Daniel Ricciardo. That is Harry Yeag's life.
Let's go to worst driver of the day.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
Who've you got for this one?
This one is a bit trickier, I think, because there were a few culprits, a few criminals making some moments. Names I'm just going to throw out there. Sergio Perez, I think, criminal defending. Couldn't keep Russell behind him even with the issue. Okay, the car wasn't great, but I also don't think they're that far apart that it should be that easy for him. Kevin Magnussen, as we said, I'm not going to give it to him, but it's frustrating that penalty cost him so much. But then if I have to talk about Kevin Magnussen, I have to talk about Nico Hulkenberg, who seemed to be nowhere near his teammate either, despite having a really, really good car. Got mucked over by Daniel Ricciardo to start with, and then just decided to drive straight into the side of the other Minardi and just take it straight out of the race. Lance Stroll was nowhere. Zhou Guanyu was even further away. I'm going to go Hulkenberg. I just think when you've got a car that's that good and you just don't feature into any part of the Grand Prix, it's not really good enough. He probably should have been that much closer to his teammate, and he seemed to be nowhere involved in the conversation.
Same. I've gone Hulkenberg as well. He should have been in the points, and his qualifying proved he could have been in the points. And I appreciate the first lap incident was not his fault, and again, we'll discuss that in a moment. But I think what has probably happened is Hulkenberg has got quite annoyed at the fact that he was in a great position and through no fault of his own is no longer in a great position, and he is desperately trying to make up moves to see if something's still available in this race, and he's took a risk and it didn't pay off. It's a bad move, and he's been penalised for it, needed to change the front wing. His race was essentially over as soon as he tried that move. I think it was a desperation move from him, which is a shame. So I've gone for Hulkenberg.
Poor Yuki Poos.
Yeah.
I mean,
just
the car
don't
wasn't
bother.
good. Just
give it Lawson whenever you turn up to Monza.
Just have a holiday. Just have an Italian holiday and then come back for the next race.
And big brain Strat.
Bob, we're gonna need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
Big brain Strat.
I'd like to give it to Ferrari and Leclerc, but I'm going to have to give it to the engineer that touched Daniel Ricciardo's front wing and completely forgot that a penalty needed to be served, because that is how you do things in Formula One. Poor lad. I watched his entire career flash before his eyes with that mistake.
I'll go with the Leclerc one, but to focus on the Ricciardo 10-second time penalty for a second, that again, an engineer touched the car during what should have been 5 seconds without touching the car to serve the penalty for the incident with Hülkenberg. He literally just touches the right front wing. That's all he does. Immediately knows what he's done. Am I being serious with what I'm about to say? Maybe. I don't know. He should have, in that moment, just gone, start working, get working on it.
Yeah, you may as well.
Because you might as well at that point, instead of just waste another 3 seconds. I know it doesn't matter to his end result. He's still not going to get any points. And I can say that in hindsight and not having to make a split-second decision. But in reality, as soon as someone sees that he's touched the car, they should just start working, because they're going to get the penalty anyway.
There is a little part of me, and I know I'm wrong for this point of view. I know I'm aware I'm wrong, but I feel like if you touch the car and you gain nothing meaningful from it, I feel like you should just be allowed to just go, he literally steadied the front wing and took his hands off it again. It was technically served. It's up in the air. It's a grey area. You can easily go, well, that means you could probably get away with tying little things without someone realising, or he put his hand on the wing and actually managed to change something. It's all grey area. I know it's wrong, but I felt harsh for the guy. I did feel really bad for him.
It is awful, because it's another one where, you can't... What do you say to him? What does he say to everyone in the team? Because it's just an honest mistake. You can't even go, don't do that again, because he didn't mean to do it the first time.
It's a reflex. It's a reflex.
Yeah, you've kind of just got to shrug your shoulders and go, all right, on to the next one. There's not much you can do.
Pit crew is pure reflex, right? They change those tyres, they move those cars around, they drive at you at 80 kilometers an hour. In 2.5 seconds, you have to run on instinct. He simply forgot. He got powered by adrenaline. It's an honest mistake.
Before we go to our final break on this episode, did just want to focus on some of the penalties that were handed out today, because...
List them off, Ben.
There were quite a few. We had Kevin Magnussen getting his 10-second penalty for his incident with Pierre Gasly. We had Daniel Ricciardo, who got a 5-second time penalty for his incident with Nico Hülkenberg, and then the 10-second time penalty for that engineer touching the car. And then Hülkenberg, he had a 10-second time penalty as well. That was for the incident with Yuki Tsunoda that saw Yuki Tsunoda retire from the Grand Prix. Any disagreements with them? And even if you do agree with all of them, should any of the penalty amounts have changed?
Something I'd like to ask. I'd like your opinion, Ben. Do you think the collision between K-Mag and Gasly was the same severity as the collision between Hülkenberg and Tsunoda?
Yes.
Yeah?
I think so. Maybe the Hülkenberg one is slightly more egregious, but from a penalty perspective, I'd probably go for the same.
I only bring it up because while streaming, I missed the full piece of contact, so I just wanted to make sure.
I think they were comparable. It's the driver being ambitious and trying to move up the inside and punting the other driver as a result. I don't think there's much in between them.
The one that I'd probably argue against is perhaps the Daniel Ricciardo incident, because that feels like a slight touch going into a heavy braking zone and a fast corner that it just felt like a bit of a racing moment for me. Everyone came off with it all right. I know we don't judge on end result, we judge on the contact, but it was so minimal at such a high pace. I don't know if 5 seconds was warranted. And then, of course, it was compounded on the fact that they mucked up the pit stop, which then meant that they didn't serve it, which then meant that he technically got a 15-second time penalty for a very, very small incident that occurred. So, yeah, I don't know if it was fully 5 seconds worth.
Well, obviously, as the people know, I have this awful agenda against Daniel Ricciardo, so naturally I think it was a fine penalty. I think he moves across him in the braking zone. It could have been worse. I think he was lucky that it wasn't. I think 5 seconds was justified there. He doesn't arrive on the scene late, because if that was the case, then I would change my opinion, but he knows he's there. It's just a bit clumsy, not leaving him enough room. So I thought it was a fair penalty.
Would you change any of the others?
I wouldn't. Weird day. I think the FIA, apart from not investigating the Perez moving in the braking zone incident, I think the FIA actually did a good job today. I think they got them right. And they were fairly quickly handed out as well. Like, they didn't waste a lot of time.
Genuinely, they were. Within a few laps, we saw what was going on. One thing that I guess it just never happened. I thought Lando Norris sped into the pit lane. Not going to lie, it was waiting all race for that to come up.
Yeah, he had to work very hard to slow that down, didn't he? Obviously, collided with the right. It's not really a barrier, is it? But like the bollard. Yeah, like the bollard. He collides with that. It looked touch and go. But
I thought that's at least, if he's having to slow down, still locking up over the line. I feel like you sped into the pit lane, but clearly he didn't.
It's one of those where if it's being investigated, it's a slam dunk penalty because they have the data to basically say yes, he did it or no, he didn't. So it's got to be one of those where he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, well done to him. Got it slowed down right at the last moment, but interesting.
Let's take our final break on this episode. We've got moment of the race right after this. Welcome back to the final part of today's Italian Grand Prix review. And that, of course, means we're going to do moment of the race. Before we get to some Discord submissions, we will, of course, give our own moment of the race. So what have you got, Sam?
I'm going to be really, really boring. And I'm going to say that it was Charles Leclerc winning the race.
Yeah, it was all right, wasn't it?
Oh, it's bloody awesome. It was so good. I live for those moments in F1. Hearing him scream over the radio in full Italian, that's the passion I live for in Formula One. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. So that, for me, was by far one of the best moments of the season, let alone the moment of the race. I loved it.
I'll be a bit more particular about it and say I loved the crowd's reaction to it. Because
the noise.
It was the noise, but it was not only that, it was the build-up of the noise. So it was the realization that like 9 laps to go, this could be on, and you start to hear sort of the crowd ramping up a bit, and then like 5 laps to go, or 6 or 5 laps to go, it's really quite loud, and you're at that point you're like, oh god, this is gonna be like booming with two laps to go, 1 lap to go, and it was.
Lap 50, he crossed the line, and you heard them erupt, and I was like, wow, that is the moment.
It was quite telling as well whenever like the Sky Sports commentary team went to Ted Kravitz, who obviously has audio in the pit lane, and you could hear Charles Leclerc go past, and the crowd reaction, like it somewhat comes across like when they're not in like just normal broadcast mode, but when they go to the pit lane, you can hear it quite raw. Like that's where it was really telling. So
really shows you what Ferrari means to Italy.
Yes, it really does. I'll throw something different out there. I'll just say the Piastri overtake because I thought that was sublime. But
no, I think that'll end up going under the radar this season. I think because he didn't get the win or anything, I wonder how many people are going to forget just how bloody good that overtake was.
That's, of course, our moments of the race. But we now need to hear the infamous bong of Google Meet as we go to screen share and find out some of these other ones.
Oh, yeah, I definitely didn't forget that I had to do that, actually. So please hold, caller, as I now get that in place. Technical difficulties music, which I don't think we can play due to copyright issues. There was the bong. Was that the bong? Did you hear the bong?
Bong.
Good. I forgot because Harry's not here that I have to take charge of this. Good stuff. Right, we're here. Oh, there's my toes. Oh, sorry, everyone.
People can't even see that.
That's really funny, but my toes are wrong, Discord.
It's literally only bad for me.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, we hear from you. If you want to be heard in your submissions, you can join the Discord. We do this before every race preview and after every race for the review. So get involved. You'll hear yourself on the podcast, and we love hearing what you have to say. So first up, fry up the sausages, Barry.
What's going on, everybody? Fry up the sausages, Barry here. And yes, Crofty, I get sticky nuts when it gets hot too.
I hoped it wouldn't come up. Even I haven't said it yet.
Again, hate to nitpick, what's the moment of the race?
Yeah, that's true. Was it
That can't be it.
Surely sticking nuts. I mean, to be fair, we've had far worse moment with the races.
That's true.
Sticking nuts is bad. Coming up next is Bracket Dom.
What's up, late breaking game? Bracket Dom back again. I think the moment of the race had to be something that happened off screen that we didn't even see after Leclerc crossed the finish line. How about Kevin Magnussen holding off a 10-second gap over Alonso to still get points in a Haas with a 10-second penalty? That is absolutely nuts. You shouldn't score in a Haas without a penalty, and he scored in one with one. Good for K-Mag.
It's a fair point.
It's
they
crazy.
had the pace today, and he still delivered.
Mega stint that was completely unnecessary, but also was necessary. It's an odd one, but yes, he was very quick.
He ended up costing himself 1 point.
Yes.
It's not bad, really. All right, coming up next is a fan favourite of ours. It's Norm.
Oh, hello, my late breaking friends from across Lay Big Wet. It is I, Norm from Texas, and I'm here to give my moment of the race, and my moment of the race is... Bear with me, folks. I'm going to say something shocking. Ferrari strategy call.
Oh.
Yeah, let it sink in. Anyway, keep breaking late.
The anticipation was killing me.
The suspense. It's like better than a horror film. Crikey. Fair play on. Yeah, we don't often see a good Ferrari strategy call. It ended up being the race win for them today. Moving on, we have Inferno Jim.
Afternoon, lads. What can we say? Moment of the race is Charlabolica, the Clarabolica.
No,
Sneaky child whispering like a legend and delighted me and everybody in the world that loves the Italian. Absolute banger of a national anthem. Woo!
God, it was good hearing that anthem a couple of times ago, wasn't it?
What did you call him? Charabolica la
Here we
Parabolica.
Afternoon, lads. What can we say? Moment of the race is Charlabolica, the Clarabolica.
Charlabolica, la Clarabolica.
I don't do this often, Inferno Jim, but
He's got the gunge out. Jim, you're getting gunged.
Sorry, Jim, but thank you for the submission.
We appreciate it. Up next is the BAD, the Big American Daddy.
This is Big American Daddy. My moment of the race. Why in God's name did they pit Oscar Piastri? McLaren coming to the front again by snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. You guys keep going, and Max just may be able to keep the championship.
Again, not sure it's a moment of the race, but an analysis that I can understand.
I mean, it can be argued it's a big time fumble. It's meaningful.
If it gets in the title and there's a few points in it, that could be the reason why. One of our favourite names in Discord coming up next, and it is Dorito Dust.
What's going on, boys? It's Ben's favorite name here, Dorito Dust. My moment of the race is Piastri on lap 1. He's a little cheeky there. I like it. My least favorite moment of the race is Tsunoda. I feel like he always has bad luck. I love the little guy, but I don't know. The universe doesn't. All right, peace.
Yeah, you can't help but root for the little guy. And in this sense, it's literally Tsunoda.
Bless him. He really can't catch a break at this circuit.
No, it's a tough time for him. Up next is Ben Roby, first time subby.
Ben here from Idaho, first time submitter. Moment of the race was Red Bull. Just looking like a mid-tier team all around. Verstappen punching the steering wheel in the pit lane. And the announcer saying, well, he's had plenty of practice of that this weekend. And then Norris coming up behind him and Verstappen asking, should I race him? Yeah, you should.
I mean, you should probably take him out. Like, that'll help.
To be honest, not that it's sportsmanlike, but it would make sense, right? It would make sense to do such a thing.
Oh, God. I'm joking, I promise. I don't mean that.
So we're all aware, Ben thinks that Verstappen taking out Norris every race for the rest of the season is the correct move. Good.
Come on, just think of it, Max.
Not heard of this guy before. Ben, do you know this one?
He looks a bit dodgy.
We can always edit him out afterwards.
Yeah.
All right, fine. Hari, I think is how you say this.
Hello everyone, it's Italian Harry here. Sorry I'm not on the podcast, but I thought I'd just chuck in a submission for my moment of the race. It has to be Ferrari doing a strategy. We need to conduct an investigation, because that was, I think they might have hired Ross Brawn back, because that was core 2000s Ferrari right there. I thought I was 8 years old again, and it was Michael Schumacher. It was excellent stuff. Charles Leclerc, you are a god. And that was just excellent. Bye.
He's close, but it's not Ross Brawn. The last time that Charles Leclerc won the Italian Grand Prix, who was team principal? Mattia Binotto.
Who was there today?
Who was there today?
He was there. Mattia Binotto. Yes, he is the man. To be fair, at least they didn't win it with a stupid engine this time. They actually
I don't know.
thought about it.
Don't say it too early. Give it a few months.
They just toned it down by a few percent this time. Up next is Inspector Seb.
Hey guys, Inspector Seb here. It's been a long time between submissions for me, but I needed to come out of the woodwork and cry in Australian. I'm so happy for the Tifosi, but McLaren, what are you doing? Moment of the race. Pitting Oscar. Why?
Yeah. To be fair, did you hear his post-race interview? He was gutted.
Yeah, you see the look on his face. He was like, it hurts, right? P2 always hurts. And but I still think he reacted appropriately, right? He gave a reaction. He was like, I care about this. It's a shame, but we were outclassed today on strategy.
I think it hurt him because obviously he somewhat made the call over team radio to say, I'm not sure my front left can do this, or I'm not sure these tyres can go until the end. And I think he will be thinking afterwards, seeing what Leclerc did, maybe I could have done.
Do you think that was the other strategy?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a shame. That is a shame. When they cry in Australia, did the tears go up?
Who's next?
SoCal Jen! Lovely to hear from you again.
Hey, it's Jen from SoCal. Moment of the race. I have two. Nico Rosberg really trying to get a rise out of Lando during the post-race interview. He did not bite, but he sure looked depressed. And what about the cool-down room? Awkward. Join the Patreon.
It was awkward. It was a little bit awkward. I feel like, when you go somewhere with your friend and one of your friends knows someone else, but you've never met them. Yeah. I feel like Oscar and Lando went somewhere together, and Oscar's other friends had turned up, and Lando sat there like, I don't like you. You're not my friend. I'm not going to talk to you. So Oscar had to make lots of polite conversation.
Yeah, I reckon so. Also, this is not something we're going to get into today, but we absolutely will. Nico Rosberg being offered a piece of Alpine is the best news of the weekend.
Was that real? Was it genuinely real?
Oh, it's Alpine. It's real. Of course it's real.
God.
Yeah, that was very entertaining FP3 content, but
let's just pretend it's real, even if it's not.
Yeah, sure.
And the final submission for today, and again, thank you to all of you. We've got so many submissions. I'm not surprised after such a belter. We can't play them all, I'm sure you'll understand, but thank you so much for everyone that has submitted. Final one, Blazy.
Hello, boys. Hope you're doing well. What an Italian Grand Prix. I loved it. Moment of the race has to be, I think it was Lando's team radio, where his engineer goes, Papaya rolls. As if McLaren couldn't get any more uncool. But shout out Charles Leclerc. I love the fact that I heard the Italian national anthem twice. Forza Ferrari. Let's go.
It's so right. It's so
Papaya rules. God, I hate Papaya rules so much.
I didn't realise quite how much I hate it, but I
really hate it.
I'm probably gonna have to hear that a lot for the rest of this
You
season.
know that
well.
if Harry was here, he'd sign off by going, and I've been Papaya rules.
He probably would. That's going to do it for today's episode. Review of the Italian GP in the books. We don't have a race coming up next weekend, but there is still plenty to talk about, so I reckon we'll be back on Wednesday.
If you look at the history, I'd say it points to us being back on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Maybe. Harry might be here too. Who knows? We'll see if he turns up. Folks, thanks for listening. I'm one bold point richer after today, and
True.
I've had a lovely, lovely time. I hope you have too. Thanks for joining us on the stream. Thanks for listening to the show. And if you want more Monza Chit Chat, then we will be back on Patreon for our power rankings tomorrow as well. You can join at the links in the description. We really appreciate all the support over there. That's been growing really, really nicely. So thank you to everyone that's joined recently. Discord's down there as well. Follow us on social media, and you can watch this on YouTube if you fancy late breaking F1. I think that's going to do it for us now. We'll see you midweek. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
And I've been Ben Hocking. And remember, keep breaking late.